There is another dimension beyond that which is known to intelligent human beings. It is a dimension of boundless stupidity. It is an abyss of inescapable idiocy and delusion, and it lies between the ears of utterly lobotomized fools. This is the dimension of unending, pointless confusion and despair, a dimension birthed by the ugly twin siblings of politics and religion. It is a dimension which we call the toilet zone. And you ain't seen nothing yet. So I've taken a little liberty there with the first introduction to the Twilight Zone from, 60 years ago or more? We haven't seen anything yet. And of course, we could focus on all of the never ending and ever more extreme actions, the news of the day, whether it pertains to the ridiculous way in which people are pushing to remove lockdowns and constraints because of their personal rights and freedom in the midst of a terrible pandemic with an Ebola level pathogen. Or we could talk about the ever progressing social breakdown, the coming and almost fully present civil wars, still yet to go into full bloom. We know that, we're going to see that more and more. And I think everybody at this point who knows about this, who's aware and who's getting flooded with all sorts of news sources and seeking stuff out to provoke their own fears more and more, or to become better informed, already knows where all of this is heading. So, what is the wiser course and how do we get there? That is the purpose of the Billy Meier contacts. It is the purpose of the core purpose of the case, the spiritual teaching. Books like The Might of the Thoughts. The study of this material helps us find the way to live, the real way to live, not all of the stuff that continues to be sold to us, even in the midst of all of the social breakdown and terrible pandemic, etc. The political dicing, the back and forth, the blame game, the seeking of advantage of any and all parties who are politically invested in their own power and in using the situations to those ends. That is already a foregone conclusion. And for those of us who've already studied and been, through our own due diligence, convinced of the accuracy, certainly of the prophetic information in the Meier contacts, we don't need to involve ourselves with that unless, of course, you get a particular joy out of doing that. I don't. So how do we best use our time? Can we get outside of our doors a little bit for fresh air, for some sunlight? Can we walk around the block if that's the best we can do, or get into a park or some nature? Can we take the phenomenally informative, deep thinking, promoting material in The Might of the Thoughts, The Way to Live? And here we have the amazing Arahat Athersata notes. Truly an amazing book. Many of you who have already been studying this material, you know that you can open one of Meier's books almost anywhere. Yeah, you can do this with other books, but you don't get the same. I've never received the same profound type of information that is available virtually anywhere in these books. And when people say, well, I opened a book and it told me just what I needed to see, to read, and we can say, well, that is adaptable. We can learn from almost anything, and I can't think of any source better to go to learn and to start focusing ourselves in the right directions. So the blogs continued. I try to be informative. The purpose of the blogs very often isn't to inform people who already know. It's so that people who are looking for something deeper, better, more profound, more accurate, reliable, trustworthy, and all the rest may come upon a blog or two here and there and want to find out more about this man, Billy Meier, his remarkable life, his meeting with real extraterrestrial human beings that has gone on for so very long and continues to this day, contrary to the disinformation that gets posted around on the oh so dependable internet. So I'd like to actually get suggestions from the audience that cares to contribute and participate about those aspects of this material that you'd like greater focus on and discussion of. If you want specific passages or books or links to information, if you once saw something on one of the websites perhaps that really struck you and got your attention for a moment, but you forgot to create a link to it, you could let me know. Maybe I know where that is, or I can find it if you can't. Of course, all of the Billy Meier related websites have search engines, so you can enter the terms that you're looking to have you be provided with that information that you want to be reminded of or learn for the first time. Because almost any search term put in here, into my blog, into my website, into Future of Mankind, into the Beam site, lots of websites, and they all have various things that the others don't, as well as the overlaps. So how do we calm ourselves down in the midst of all the crazy and all the misdirection and all the ongoing fueling of misleading people into becoming preoccupied with futile, ridiculous, rabble-rousing, and destructive and disturbing and dissettling information that doesn't benefit us? We now should know what's going on and where it's leading to. Where you and I want our lives to lead is another matter, and we are not going to find, for the most part, any reliable direction or information other than maybe some survivalist things or those categories that don't have to do with the way we actually learn to form, to control our thoughts, to have our lives proceed in a direction we prefer. We learn to control our thoughts so our thoughts don't control us. We don't want the buildup of the fears and anxieties that all of this, either deliberately or otherwise, provokes. What are you going to do with one onslaught after another, one bit of bad news after another? If you look at it and you distill it down, what you could do is you could see it in the light of cause and effect. You could use almost any article or bit of information as an experiment in reverse engineering. We do that with the prophetic information, and you will see with any and all of these announcements and new occurrences in the world that they can be reverse engineered. We will see the causal origins and how they have proceeded. Now, we, our so-called leaders and officials, et cetera, have failed to heed the warnings, to learn, to look, to see, to understand the causal relationships of all of these things that come right back to the thinking of human beings, people just like you and me, and some that are maybe different. So I do encourage you to get a hold of this material. I encourage you to go on my website and my blog for all the free information, the articles from, about Billy Meier, the spiritual teaching elements that he's put forward, there's nothing that's more beautiful than the introduction to the spiritual teaching that you will find on theyfly.com in the section called the spiritual teaching, elements of it. Left-hand side of that website. Read what Semyaze said to Billy in that Contact 10, sentence after sentence of beautiful, precise, logical, inspiring, clarifying, uplifting, optimistic truth. Not New Age nonsense, not fancy and, let's say, inaccurate, hyperbolic, wishful thinking, but truth. And when we read that, we take it in and we incorporate it in our being through our thinking and the feelings that are produced by that thinking and the feelings that arise that give birth to a little more thinking, give birth to the actions that we take that are deliberate or the deliberate inactions in some cases, so that we start to take delight in this thing that is our own life, our lives. We take delight because we can proceed holding in our little hands these books, studying and thinking about it. There's nothing to believe in here, because if you're thinking about these things doesn't produce the inner awareness and the testing and trying of this teaching, not a belief system, then you're not going to get the fruits of the labors that must be put in here as well. There's nothing more important right now. When we sit with this, when we search for, honor, and respect the truth, and we start to find that there are others in our lives who want to know, and we can say, well, look over here. There'll be others who've been looking and reading and thinking. We can speak with each other. We can become healthily interdependent in certain ways, even with the limitations imposed upon physical presence. We have the opportunity to forge true bonds with people through the commonality of values, clear thinking, and that which is taught in the spiritual teaching. This eventually leads to the formation of small groups and larger groups, and people who are on a path of truth. It's not a flawless or unencumbered path. It simply has its obstacles which are necessary for our growth. The obstruction and opposition in life is something that we need to welcome, because it's an inescapable, necessary part for our growth, for our evolution. As Billy said, the meaning of life is the evolution of consciousness. So I've intended here to spend some time talking about things that are truly important. Not that pandemics and civil wars and the rest aren't important, but focusing our thinking on how we create the lives we prefer, which over time will manifest if we're consistent and persistent. That's the thing that I want to talk about today and from here on.